Welcome to the first episode of the Dilettante Scholars, a podcast where nonsense meets knowledge, as the two are so intimately intertwined. I'm Haley.
And I'm Tiff.
And we are
the Dilettante Scholars.
This podcast is going to be something of a mesh between popular culture, current events, life updates, and other nonsense with the current world of scholarship in a variety of fields and disciplines. Essentially, the structure of every episode will have one of us being the dilettante and one of us being the scholar. The dilettante brings their current interests to the table, whether that be her most recent binge watch, a book club comment, or what's trending on our For You page.
And the scholar will then go over her most recent scholarly read. The rest of the episode will consist of us trying to make connections between the two segments because we both believe that that's where education and the humanities are centered. Connections. So I'm going to save my scholarly stuff for now, and I'm going to let Haley get right into it.
Awesome. Okay, so for today's episode, I will be your dilettante. My topic today is going to be kind of personal, but I promise it does relate to books. I just have a lot going on at the moment. I tried to make a 5-part list of all of the things that are happening in my life. It ended up being very long, so
more than 5 parts?
Quite more than 5 parts. So I had to boil it down to only 5 things that are going on. There's just a lot of upheaval. So at the moment, I am preparing my PhD applications and portfolios while also working on my MA exam. I had to combine that into one.
Cute.
Number 2, I'm working 2 assistantships and trying to figure out a work-life balance.
Again, you combine 2 things.
Because they were, but
perfect.
They go together because me trying to figure out a work-life balance is because of me having 2 assistantships. If I only had one, it probably would not be as difficult.
Right.
Okay.
Who did that too? Anyway.
Oh. Number 3 is I'm preparing to move to a different town. 30 minutes away from campus, and the commute and planning and trying to figure out my calendar and what I'm going to do on my 12-hour days on campus.
Rip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like I'm like packing and preparing, and I just like signed my final notice of like a vacancy thing. I signed my lease. We were putting down the deposits. Like
it's happening.
It's happening. It's no longer a
right.
Yeah. No, it's happening.
No turning back.
Yeah. At the same time, my birthday is in little less than 2 weeks. No, about 2 weeks.
Yay.
By the time you guys are listening to this, I will already be aged. But I'm turning 24 on July 4th, and I'm trying to figure out. Stop. You're turning 24 like a month after me. Old hag. Anyways, I'm trying to figure out what it means to like start getting into my mid-20s. Because I am realizing that, like, it's the mid-20s.
It means denial. You like, just deny it.
But, like, I can't, because then I have, like, 1 more year until I have to, like, I'm off my mommy's insurance. like, it's no longer an option for me to just be like, beepity-boppity-boo. Like, we now have to, like, adult, and it's getting terrifying.
Yeah.
And number 5, trying to stay sane.
That's a hard one.
That's a tough one, especially if you listen very carefully to parts 1 through 4 and the fact that I had to combine them for half of it. So yeah, there's just like a lot going on. And like Tiff is basically in the exact same position as me.
Besides the moving.
But like everything else. And that's still stressful.
Yeah.
So like.
I'm just planning on like living abroad for a month.
Oh, yeah.
That's been a lot.
So we're both packing just for different things. Yeah, mine are going into boxes, yours are going into a suitcase.
Yeah. And I'm going for a whole month, right? I'm not bringing anything but a carry-on because I refuse to pay for luggage.
To be fair, I've seen a lot of people do that. It's really not too hard, especially in the summer because it's mainly like shorts and tank tops.
And the moment I'm going to Oxford. Hi. The moment Oxford said, we have laundry facilities, I was like, okay, so you're going to see me wear the same short 5 times.
And that's totally okay. As long as it's with different shorts than the last time I saw you wear it. No one cares.
Right.
Yeah.
People don't care.
No
and
one
if
cares.
They do, honestly, if you care that much, like, I'm going to judge you for judging me.
Because, like, why are you tracking me?
Right. Weird. Continue.
But I am excited about Tiff going to England because she's going to see a lot of very cool things, and Oxford is very fun, and she has to bring me back a tote.
A tote.
From Blackwell's.
From Blackwell's.
Thank you. And if you have time to go to London and visit Waterstones, I believe that you should do that because I love Waterstones. It's a 5-story bookstore. It is the...
I will have actually a couple of hours in London. I know it's literally a couple of hours, but all I want to do is go to Waterstones and King Cross Station. That's it.
That's it. And they're within like
so
10
I have
minutes.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're totally got it.
Like I have 4 hours. That's enough time.
Definitely.
I will spend 2 hours in the bookstore and then like 2 hours just walking. But yeah, that's what's happening.
I think that for the sake of your sanity, you should go to the bookstore last. Just in case. Just in case. If you have other things that you want to do, go to the bookstore last.
But I'm going to be so honest. If all I do is spend 4 hours in the bookstore, I have no regrets.
That's fair. And their cafe in there is really good.
Oh, there's a cafe.
They have very good food. They have a lot of vegan and vegetarian options.
Cool.
Their chai, it's real chai. It's not like chai syrup or chai flavoring. It's so good. I love Waterstones.
I'm so excited.
Oh, you're going to love it. I'm so excited for you. You must send me a bajillion pictures.
I just can't wait to get out of this country.
I think that that is a very valid take on the situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming back is going to hurt.
No, I'm going to cry.
Yeah. Especially because you're going to come back into the heat wave still.
Right.
Because they've got way better weather happening right now.
Well, no, because I'll be in Spain for a week, so it'll actually feel a little bit cold. It's going to still be hot, though.
It's still going to be hot.
It's hot here, dude.
We have a really bad heat wave going on right now, and there's like a total heat dome. So it's all just like locked into like most of like the northeast, I think.
Yeah.
And it's like trapped by the Appalachian Mountains too. So it's just like staying on us.
I know. And it's like, it would be one thing if it was like dry heat, but it's humid, bro.
It is humid, and it's like, it's not one of those, I specifically hate the summertime just because I hate sweating, but I hate the weird chunk of the summertime where it doesn't cool down at night.
Okay, so
The podcast. This is why the nonsense comes before the knowledge in our tagline.
No, 100%. Because I'm not even going to apologize for this, and it's probably going to make the final cut because I feel like this is why you listen to the podcast.
Yeah, you just want silly little life updates that are like sandwiched between actual big brain stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's also like hard to consume a lot of like heavy stuff. Because like, to be honest, today might be like a little heavier like for mine because there's just, she's big sad. But also like the scholarship itself is covering a lot.
A lot.
So if we can like sprinkle in a little bit of silliness or just girls being girls yap session throughout it, that's why we made this podcast.
And actually, it ties in perfectly because the scholarship I am going to talk about is like, it always has like interminglings of anecdotes.
Ooh.
And that's part of the reason why I love it so much is because it doesn't feel scholarly. So this will wrap around. Look at everything's connected.
And we already made a connection.
Boom.
Boom. What are we? 9 minutes in. Perfect. Okay. So back to my 5 reasons why. The biggest thing that I just wanted to like center on is just like the psychological impact that moving entails. Just because like I realized recently that moving is a very stressful and anxiety inducing experience for me just because it has never been fun. Like it's very hard to make moving fun in general unless you're like moving into a McMansion. But like it is very rare that there is not some sadness or like lingering feelings of like regret, remorse, whatever that are like happening as you are putting all of your things into a box and then realizing that like now you're taking that box out of this place that you've lived in for years.
Right.
And you're going to put it in a new place. And who knows if that place is going to suck? What if you hate living there?
Right.
Well, now all of your boxes are there, so you have no choice. And there's just like so many things that go around it. And I have moved a lot in my life. My mom was a Marine, so I'm a Marine Corps brat. And she got a new duty station every 4 years. So by the time I was 15, I had lived in 6 different cities across 5 states, 3 coasts, and 2 different countries. Yeah. So
Haley, the world tour.
The world tour. The world tour, but it's just me going to Japan and then coming back stateside. And sandwiching that with Florida.
Yay. You know that emoji that's like the smiley face, but it's like just dripping into a pile of
Yeah,
dew?
no, that's me.
Literally.
I'm melting. I'm just like melting with, yeah. Like that is the emotion. Yeah, that's today's emotion.
That's today's emotion.
Mood for today? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, I have become like a professional at packing my things up and getting them ready to go to the next house. And also not really feeling like I have a home just because this is only where I'm going to live for 4 years. This is only where I'm going to live for this long. The main reason that I'm getting my master's at the same school that I did my undergrad in was pretty much because I did not want to have a 4-year move. That stressed me out. So I didn't do great with that. I'm almost at exactly 4 years because I had to play a little bit of, I basically was here for 3 years instead of 2 for my undergrad. So it's exactly 4 years. Yeah. So not having a great time. I was originally going to stay here until I finished my MA, but things happened. So now I'm going to move in a year to go get my PhD.
Right.
And my number one school is the University of Oregon. So I'm moving house for 1 year.
And then going to a different coast.
Like all the way. And yeah. So
Haley's feeling really great.
I'm feeling amazing. Basically, every time I pack my things up, and I was doing this week, and it's just been annoying for me to do. Every time I pack my things up, my most important box is my book box. Always.
Of course.
Right now, I have just over 570 books. I like count them and I reorganize them regularly just to make sure. But I have just over like 570. And like most of those I probably did not buy. A lot of my professors give me books for free.
Right.
We have like free book stacks everywhere at JMU.
We do.
We just get free books all the time. And a big thing that people do for me as a gift is get me a book that they think I'd like. So most of them I did not pay for. I probably would not be able to afford that many books, but I have that many. And I realize that I'm going to need roughly 8 boxes just for my books because so many of them are really fat hardcovers.
Yeah.
Like all of my super scholarly stuff is like really thick, dense, like Norton Shakespeare hardcover.
Right.
So I'm doing like half of it books and then the other half is going to be like maybe a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying not to break the boxes also.
Right.
But yeah, it was as I was doing that, I realized that like when I was growing up, I was allowed exactly 1 box for my books for every duty station that we went to. So for the longest time, I had exactly 48 books. Now that may sound like a lot.
But it's not a lot if you're us.
It's not a lot when you have 570.
Right. It's not a lot.
Like that's just, thinking about that right now, one of my shelves is like 50-ish books if they're like smaller.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's crazy to think about that now. But I was thinking about how I had less than 50 books basically from middle school until I moved out of my mom's house. And that's just like, I cannot imagine having less than 50 books right now. But those books were like this is going to sound so embarrassing, but those books were my friends because they were like the only constant that stayed with me. Like the characters never switched up personalities on you. They never said unexpected things. The world didn't like shift suddenly and they ended up in a completely different place with like no friend. Like you always knew what was happening and you always knew what was there.
Yep.
And so like those little worlds in the books were like my only consistent worlds. So those were my best friends. Those were my teeny tiny Roman empires. And, you know, the job of my books was to stay the same every single time and never change. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to kind of boil my 5 Roman Empire stressful moments this summer into 5 books that were my Roman Empire.
I love that.
And I hope it makes sense. Because I kind of figured that these were like my building blocks. Like these are my personality traits in books.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting.
I love this.
And telling about me.
That's great for a first episode too, because it's kind of like get to know you through your books.
Nice to meet you. One of my favorite books is Gone Girl. Read it when I was 13, changed my life. We'll get there. My number 1 book, Every Day by David Levithan. Have you read it?
I have not.
An adorable little YA novel. I usually reread it like every year just because it makes me happy.
Oh, I love that.
Basically, this character named A changes into a different person's body every day. Like they wake up in that person's body.
Wow. I've always, as a kid, I always wanted to do that.
Like, isn't that cool?
I still think that would be so sick to wake up as someone else.
I do think and it's a thing that like happens in the book. It would be stressful for me to have to act like that person and not like ruin any friendships or say the wrong thing. Or like, what if they don't know this and someone asks this question and I say this and it's like, but you're in 8th grade. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, that was like a thing that they like struggled with in the book. But basically they woke up in a different body every day. They were the same age every single time. But one time they wake up in the body of this guy and his girlfriend, Rhiannon, the most lovely girl in the world. She's so sweet. A falls in love with her. And so every day when they wake up in a new body, they go and find Rhiannon. And eventually Rhiannon like recognizes them. Like, oh, it's such a good book. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, dang, imagine someone like wanting to find you no matter who they are or what's going on with them.
Yeah.
That was just like peak romance. Like, that was my YA moment. It was, but I kind of boiled that one down to finding some kind of work-life balance because I realized that I am a different person at work than I am with my friends. And not even just like I speak a little different, I act a little like people that I work with do not know who I am. Mm-hmm. They straight up do not know who I am. They don't know what my real voice sounds like. Like they've never heard me actually laugh. It's so weird trying to find that balance with like social things and still feeling like myself when I haven't seen my friends for a really long time, because that's another thing. Like we hang out every week. Right. We literally book it on our calendars to hang out once a week. But it's so interesting how if I don't see you for a really long time, we stop doing that thing where we like finish each other's
sentences.
You're supposed to say sandwiches.
I was supposed to say sandwiches.
That's
I know,
okay.
But I didn't want to because I hate that line in that movie.
I do. What do you say? Oh, Anna, if only someone loved you. That was crazy.
That was insane.
That was the hardest villain line I've ever heard, though. Like,
yeah,
you
no,
are
it was
unkillable suddenly.
It was kind of.
That was crazy.
He
popped off, but he should have not. He should have kept that to himself. Because that hurted my feelings. Because then I remember immediately being like, okay, well, Kristoff is the one.
Yeah,
Screw you, Hans.
I feel like I've been trying not to finish your sentences as much after I became aware that it did that.
It like doesn't bother me. I think it's funny most of the time. And like, especially if we're like both being like really animated in the conversation, it makes me feel like we are like in the conversation together. Yeah, instead of I'm just talking at you.
Like when we were on our walk like a week ago, we couldn't help it. And we were the entire time we were just like
we needed to yap because we were getting sun and we were like absorbing the solar energy and it was powering
Even
us.
Last night you and I were like
no, that was crazy because you're like, I have to go at 9 and then I got out of your car at like 8:57.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next book.
Oh, yes. The next book. Well, this one is a series. The full set of the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis. Mm-hmm. My Roman Empire. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Okay. One thing about me, I love a little fantasy.
One thing about me, I'm sorry.
That's making it into the final cut. But one thing about me, I love a little fantasy. I discovered like the Lord of the Rings series and The Hobbit like far after I got into the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
But my mom made me read The Magician's Nephew like when I was like a baby. I was like so small. Magical. It was one of the first books that I remember finishing. Oh, I love it. It was like Shel Silverstein and Chronicles of Narnia. Yeah. And I had like the full box set. And I just loved like not being in real life. And I loved the idea and like a lot of people like have this like Harry Potter one where it's like any world that's like you're a normal person, then you get taken to like a new thing, those like isekai things. Yeah. I wasn't like a Harry Potter kid. I was an Aragon kid, but I was first and foremost a Chronicles of Narnia kid. Something about me, I love the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
My sister and I, we used to play an imaginary game. It was just the Chronicles of Narnia, but we came up with like spin-off plots.
Oh.
Where like we would be entering Narnia and the Evil Queen would be going after us, right?
Oh. And where was Aslan?
He would always show up.
Okay.
He would always show up and save the day.
As long as he was there.
But like I literally, this is such a core memory for me. So we had 2 trees in my house and that's how we said like that was the entrance to Narnia. Mm-hmm. And we were playing this Narnia game and it was like, it was a spring day. And so it was like half of the ground was snow and half was grass. And we were like, oh, the queen's back.
No, that's good.
She's back. And so, and we were playing this whole game and we finished the game and I turned to my sister and I was probably like 6, which meant she was like 9. And I turned to her, I said, Sierra, that game felt so real. And she turned to me and she went, "That's because it was."
I had no idea where that was going, but I'm so glad that's where it went. No, she's so real for that.
And the way that I was like, like, I have never believed in something more than I did in our Narnia magic. Santa who? Narnia.
We believe in Tilda Swinton.
Yeah, that was... I like believed the world was better.
Because the snow, half and half.
It was
that
crazy.
would have convinced me.
Oh, yeah.
I would have immediately been like, we gotta go. We gotta go.
So cool.
Ugh. I need a Mr. Tumnus tattoo.
That's so fair.
I loved Mr. I had the worst crush on him. I had the worst crush on him. And like until I saw Prince Caspian on screen, Mr. Tumnus was my husband.
Right.
I was married to him in my head.
Yeah.
I wore a red scarf to school every day. I'm not kidding you.
That's amazing.
My first Dungeons and Dragons character was basically just Mr. Tumnus. Like I loved that. I loved that man. I needed him. I was literally just like, he's mine. He is mine. I don't know why.
I don't know.
What was that?
I don't know, but when I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe too, which I read as like a full adult, I was like, oh, Mr. Tumnus.
It's just that like he's so kind and he guides them and he protects them. Even if he's a little shy, he's a little nervous.
He's just a little guy.
He's just a little guy.
And he's so perfect.
Oh,
I
love Mr. Tumnus.
So what is Chronicles of Narnia to you in your life?
Oh, running away from my responsibilities. When I had a really bad day, I would go into my room and I would read the Chronicles of Narnia and I would pretend that I was there because it just made me feel so much better to not have to be like a real person. Because I remember the first time I ever told my mom that I was stressed and she literally went, "What do you have to be stressed about?" Because I was like 7. And I was like, "You're so real for that. Let me go read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in my room."
Yeah.
Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I actually couldn't finish that one because I was like, it's too stressful. But like, there's just something about like being able to pretend that everything's okay as long as I'm happy.
Right.
And that like, if I ignore the stress, it goes away. That's like my worst habit right now. I have to like force myself to sit down and work on things. And it's like, yeah, because eventually the kids had to go back home.
Yeah, they did.
They did. And that's just how it is. You cannot always live in a fantasy land. And even if you are, a really cool lion is going to teach you some lessons because he is a stand-in for Jesus.
Right.
So book 3, Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn.
I love your range.
The range is actually crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one is very... I was really tempted to have a full-on Gone Girl moment last year before I got the results back that I was accepted into the master's program. I'm not even kidding you.
That's so
I was working
fair.
a job that I hated. Like, I didn't hate it, but it was a terrible working environment, and it was very stressful and like terrible on my psyche.
I feel that on so many levels.
No, and it's literally
because
like,
we were basically in like a very similar situation.
yes, and it's like, what do you do?
We both worked at like, well, she worked at, what was it technically called?
It was an alternative behavioral school.
Okay, and I worked at like an under-resourced school that was essentially like, for a lot of kids, not all of them by any means, but for a lot of them, it was like, this is your last chance before you get kicked out of Milwaukee Public Schools and need to go to an alternative behavior school. We had like multiple students that had, you know, like ankle bracelets and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I loved the students. I loved working with them, but it was just so underfunded and there were no resources.
None.
There was no teaching and training that like prepared us for the amount of things that we would have to do. Like I worked in a special ed classroom and a lot of my students had developmental disabilities that gave them like severe like reactions to certain foods, or like they couldn't do this or they couldn't do this. And like the first time I ever saw my student have a seizure, I had to gather the rest of my kids and get them out of the classroom. And that was like the worst day ever because I couldn't cry.
Right.
Because I didn't want to cry. Like that was just, it was a very emotionally taxing job. I'm so glad that I got that experience because now I am so much more feral about accessible education, funding education, resources for the students and for teachers, all of these different things. Like I don't think I would be.
I think that's where it comes from, honestly, for both of us, because that's same for me too. It was like this circumstance where like everyone was acknowledging that it was like bad, but then what are we doing about it?
Nothing, because who cares about public schools, let alone schools for students who have like circumstances that make it difficult for them to go to public school.
And I was like, hi, where's the services? Because you're doing a disservice to the students every single day.
And like seeing them, and the fact that like one of my students, he was probably one of the worst behaved students that we had. He just really needed attention and one-on-one time with teachers. And he had this problem with like grabbing people because he was also nonverbal. So he would grab people, and a lot of times he would hurt people because he like had his nails really long because his mom couldn't cut them. Yeah. So he was really like physically like dangerous at times. And it was literally like, if you don't give him enough attention, that happens. I started teaching him sign language. Yeah. I bought the classroom like a sign language sign to put up. His behavior got so much better. And it's literally just like one of those things where like, I wouldn't have thought of that if I wasn't friends with a sign language interpreter.
But it's also like, duh, because if you can't interact with other people through language, you're going to try to interact with them in any way that you can. Yeah. And if that means grabbing them, that means grabbing them. It's like, you can't fault a student when you're not giving them the tools to succeed. That's why I'm like pro the saying there are no bad students.
Yes.
Because there aren't.
That part. Because it was literally like, do you know what PEX books are?
No.
It's basically like a binder that has a bunch of Velcro on it, and they have these little pictures that sometimes have words on them, but it's like a picture that Velcros to the front of the binder. So like he had one that said snack and had one that said water. So if he wanted like a snack, he would rip it off and hand it to you. Yeah. And we started making him use either the PEX book or he had to use sign language. Yeah. And sometimes he would go to grab it and then be like, and then he'd remember the sign for it. And
I love that.
Literally just made me so happy. But that's one of those things that like the average teacher is so underfunded. They don't have the resources. They're too stressed. They're like stretched
tired,
too thin. Like butter spread over too much bread. They do not have the time to get that one-on-one interaction with students. So it's also harder to track progress when you aren't watching them that closely. Right. And it's also one of those things where there are so many lapses in progress when, say, there's like a switch up and there's no longer like staff there, like a big thing at the school that I worked at.
Teacher turnover.
The turnover was terrible.
Turnover. Ours was horrible.
And there's no like, there's nothing for the students to like hang on to.
No.
Especially if like your favorite teacher leaves because she's getting beat up every day and she's not getting paid enough. Well, now you're going to jail. Right. Like, okay, wait, that phrasing was crazy. One of my students went to jail after I left. He's my favorite student. He was my favorite student ever. He went to jail, but he did get his GED while he was in jail, and he graduated.
Good for him.
I'm proud of him. Book 4. What was that one? That was Gone Girl. What? Oh, yeah. So basically, I was in that situation, and it was so stressful that I wanted to pull a Gone Girl. That was what I was getting at. Okay. Paper Towns by John Green. I loved Paper Towns. I almost put Looking for Alaska instead because I had a really bad John Green phase where I just reread all of his books over and over and over again, and then I found out what a Manic Pixie Dream Girl was, and then I stopped reading the books because I was like, oh no. Oh no. I do not fault him. Because he got his bag. He wrote for the people that needed to be written for. Yeah. But I do hate most of his male protagonists.
Yeah, that's so fair.
They are some of the most irritating people on earth because they like come up with these like fake ideas of women in their head, and they're like, well, she's hot, therefore she's all of this. Meanwhile, she's just a girl that has shit going on. And that's like, anyways. But I related to Paper Towns a lot because I related to Margot, who was just a girl who had shit going on. But a lot of people looked at her and like saw her as this like popular person who had like a lot of potential and stuff going for her. And it was just too much stress. So she pulled a Gone Girl. She basically like disappeared into a paper town, which is like a fake town on a map. And then my final book is It's Kind of a Funny Story by Ned Vizzini. Do you know that one?
So I don't. I've definitely heard of it like many, many times, but I haven't actually picked it up.
It is my actual Roman Empire. It's one book that I refuse to loan out to people.
It's that precious to you.
It is that precious to me, and I don't annotate it.
I love that.
It is clean. It is untouched. Like I use bookmarks. I do not like dog ear the pages. It's kind of a funny story. Quick trigger warning for suicide, but
Let the people know.
Let the people know. Basically, the main character, Craig, is like incredibly depressed, and he has a lot of stuff going on. And one day he like thinks that he's going to kill himself. And so he checks himself into a mental hospital. And while he's there, he meets a bunch of like different people that like show him all of the different ways that you can be messed up, but still be a good person and a fun person to be around. And he sees a lot of hardship, and he deals a lot with imposter syndrome, which I immediately latched onto. And that was the main reason that he checked himself in, because he was just like, I'm not allowed to kill myself. Like, I'm not sad enough. I don't have enough stuff going wrong in my life.
Having imposter syndrome for suicide
is
so real.
It is so real. And it, like literally, and that's why that's my book. Like that is my book. Because it's literally like, no, because once he checked in there and he saw like there's one girl there who has like scars all over her face, and like a lot of people have like much more like visible side effects or symptoms of their mental illness, and he's there and he's just like, mine is invisible. Why am I here?
Right.
Why was I being dramatic? That is me 99% of the time that I have a meltdown. That was dramatic. Go do your homework. Like that is my response almost every single time. And reading that book and him like realizing by the end of it, spoilers, but realizing by the end of it that it's like okay to not have a lot working against you to say this is too much. Like you can still be, everyone has a different baseline, I guess. Everyone can tolerate a different amount of things. And so there's never not a good enough reason to be depressed or have a lot going on.
That reminds me of when I was in, so I have a psychology major, and I was reading this textbook, and it actually, it's funny because textbooks usually are not the spot where you have like a revolutionary moment of inspiration, but this one was. So there was like an image of, because it was trying to explain like, why do some people get PTSD over an event and other people don't? Like two people can be in a car accident and one person can have PTSD from it and one person doesn't.
Okay.
And that was something that personally I always felt like whatever I went through, like it wasn't bad enough for me to feel traumatized from it.
Yeah.
Right. And
it was, by the way.
Yeah, it was.
I'm going to validate you real quick.
And also for everyone else. Like, it was.
You are valid.
I saw this picture and it was basically like, yeah, well, for some people, their life is a cup of water that has like no water in it. So they have an event and it just fills the cup up with a little bit. But for some people, their genetics make it, they already have 3/4 of water in their cup. And that event, boom, the cup overflows and it sticks with them.
I like that.
And I was like, dang, like that's not my fault then if my cup overflowed.
Exactly. I like that.
Anyway.
No, that's good. I'm sticking with that. No, I like that. It also reminds me of this comparison that I remember hearing once about how like trauma or triggers can be, imagine there's a button on a wall and there's a ball that's bouncing around the room. Every once in a while, it won't hit it.
Right.
But then, like, over time, if the stress keeps building, the ball gets bigger. So eventually the ball will fill the room and it has to touch the button because there's nowhere else for it to go.
I love that. Because then sometimes, you know, if you experience something that is like a traumatic event, you're like, how come this one thing didn't trigger me last week, but now it's triggering?
Exactly. And it's like the ball is twice the size now. There was more water in the cup that was pouring into yours.
Wow.
I love that.
That's so good.
Wow. Look at us getting deep. Anyways, that's the end of my segment. That's the end of the dilettante. Now it's time for the scholar.
Yeah. So one of the things that then I'm thinking about is what books would I pack?
Yeah.
And let me tell you, one of the books that I would pack and actually did pack, because the books that I took with me to Virginia, not even close to my collection.
Oh.
I had one bookshelf and I said, I can only bring as many books as fit on this bookshelf.
Oh my God.
Now let me tell you, that bookshelf has runneth over since I have been here. I have books everywhere. But one of the books that I did take with me, which it was rare because I tried not to take books I had already read.
Ooh,
and
smart.
for me, it's the opposite. If I really love a book, it has writing all over it. It has dog-eared pages. It's, a mess. And that book is Hamlet, Globe to Globe, 2 years, 190,000 miles, 197 countries, one play by Dominic Dromgoole. And before I get in too deep with my review and talking points, let me first say I have no idea how to pronounce Dominic Dromgoole's last name. Sounding it out, it looks like Dromgoole to me. But if it's like Dromgoole or something, Don't fault me. Sorry. Hopefully I won't say it too much. So anyway.
Dromgoole.
Can you imagine?
He's watching this right now and he's so mad.
He's so mad.
He's like, it's goule.
It's goule. I mean, I don't know. He's a white dude. I'm going with Dromgoole. He's a British dude. I mean, I don't know. But like his picture, tell me he doesn't look like a goule.
Dromgoole.
Like he would add an extra accent.
His name is Dromgoole. It has to be.
His picture in the background is like him in like a Shakespearean sort of shirt with like candles, and it's like a dark photo.
He's like definitely in like a haunted Irish church in that picture.
It's probably the Globe Theater. Because he was the
They
director.
should not have candles in the Globe Theater.
No, they shouldn't.
They already know what happened.
Like, come on. It's so stupid. Anyway.
The Globe's ball just got bigger and the button is getting pressed.
They're so mad.
I know you guys are watching this. I'm really sorry.
Sorry, guys. I don't mean it.
I kind of did.
Oh, that's nice.
Anyways.
So this book...
So what did Dromgoole say?
So this book means a lot to me. And one of the reasons it's one of the most precious books in my collection is because of how I received it. So basically, Hamlet was the very last play that I was in. I know. I went to college. I was Guildenstern. So I went to college for a BFA in music theater, knowing that I didn't actually want a career in music theater, which some people might be like, that's so stupid. Why would you do an entire college degree? Why didn't you just do one major? Why wouldn't you do that? Well, let me tell you why. Because acting made me happy. That's it. I did it because I wanted to be happy, and I have no regrets.
As you should.
I might regret the other major because it didn't make me happy. But let me tell you, I don't regret this one at all.
And at least it's useful.
Right? You don't always have to do things just for your job.
Period.
Anyway.
You're also hearing English majors say this.
Yeah. So don't be surprised that we're the ones saying this.
Yeah.
If you care about money, you might have to do things for a job, but I don't care that much. So anyway. Hamlet was my last... You have more to say?
No, I don't care that much. About money?
Yeah. Like, I care enough to have...
How many dollars are in your checking account right now?
Not a lot.
Oh.
That's why I don't care that much.
Is it that you don't care or you can't? That was crazy work. I apologize.
No, that's true. I can't care that much. Okay, so... Hamlet was my last play, and I had always wanted to do a Shakespeare play, but because I was a music theater major, it was kind of rare because we had more acting majors than music theater majors. Oh. So usually the music theater people, like, obviously we would be doing the musicals. That would be the first choice. Mm-hmm. And then like maybe one or two would get to be in a play.
Okay, but Hamlet the musical would eat.
I feel like it should be like a rock show. But Lin-Manuel, get on that. You can make some more money. I know you need it.
If he's Hamlet, I will cry. Because I know he's going to cast himself as Hamlet.
I know who I married. The way that he like cries into everything, he's always like, oh.
Also, the fact that he only wrote Hamilton because no one wanted to hire him because he's not a good singer. Like, you can rap and you can write, sir. You can write.
You can write. Hamlet was my last play of maybe ever, which is
don't say that.
Crazy. And it's true though. And the week before I graduated, I'm obviously feeling sad and lost and like what's going to happen. And so my professor, who was my main acting professor and also the director of the play, calls me into his office and he said, I have a gift for you. And he hands me this book and
there's nothing like a professor writing a note for you in a book. Stop.
Yeah. He wrote in the book, and I'm not going to read what it says because I think that that's, you know, for me and him and whatever, but it was very sweet. And he gave it to a couple of the people in the cast, which was really cool.
Aww.
Yeah. And wrote like a different note for everyone, which was wonderful. Just, yeah.
That's really sweet.
It was so sweet. The first time I read this book, it was during the summer, directly following my graduation, and I felt totally lost in a lot of ways. I desperately wanted to go to grad school, but I felt sure that I had no chance of getting in. I was about to embark on a service year, which we've discussed, working in an underfunded high school in Milwaukee, which I knew was going to present its share of challenges, though I didn't know what at the time.
And they sure showed themselves.
They showed up, and I felt as though I had no identity because it had been wrapped up in education. And that was one of the major reasons why I wanted to take a service year, is because I knew I had no identity outside of school, and I wanted to find it for myself. I'm not sure I did.
No, but I do think you did.
I think I did in some important ways. Like the service year, I think that year, not just because of the service, but because of like how I mentally felt. It wasn't fun, but I needed to do that.
Yeah. It's one of those, like, you literally have to like get through the mud to get to the grass.
Yeah.
Like,
it taught me so much. And I also, like, those students made it worth every second.
Yes. And it's also like, now you understand both sides of education, which I think is really important when you're going into higher academia, especially to understand the perspective of not only your professors, but like what other people are going through and what you may or may not be doing in your future.
Right. And I want to know, like, the kids that come to college that come from a school like the one I worked at, like, I want to be able to help them. Yeah. Because that's a big jump that they have to do.
Yeah. And you only really learn that accessibility because you have to make it when you are not given enough of your own resources, and the school itself is for lacks of resources.
Exactly. So essentially, yeah, I read this book, and I read it because I wanted education and I didn't have it, and I felt terrified I would never get it again. Thank you, JMU.
We always got you. Go Dukes.
Go Dukes.
Go Dukes.
But this book was a huge source of comfort to me at the time that I read it in the summer after I graduated. And I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier. Like, a good book can really change your perspective. It can improve your state of mind. Yeah. It's that place you go to escape to when everything else feels too overwhelming.
This is your Narnia.
It became that for that summer.
I love that.
And I love that I'm rereading it now this summer when, again, I'm now applying to PhD programs. Yeah. And I feel the same in a lot of ways, but I also feel different in a lot of ways. And it's cool to see what I highlighted back then and to remember why I highlighted it and why I thought the things I thought. Yeah. So what is this book? Well, essentially, Hamlet Globe to Globe is a mashup of theatrical analysis, inspirational advice, and interesting anecdotes from Dromgoole's experiences directing the Globe Theater's international tour of Hamlet from 2014 to 2016. As the title indicates, the play was taken to 197 countries. Wow. Throughout those 2 years.
It was 2 years?
2 years.
Oh my gosh.
It was like constant.
That's 100 countries a year.
It was crazy. Yep.
Wait, that's a different country every 3 days?
Yeah, it was insane.
Whoa. Okay.
It was wild. And it was performed in a variety of venues. So they took the show, obviously they had just a couple props, not really much in terms of set. They had expected stages, like a regular stage you would expect. Like, they performed at the Folger Shakespeare Library,
We love her.
They performed for the EU. Which is not a stage. They performed in rock concert venues. They also performed in refugee camps. So wow, it was every possible stage imaginable. And they, a lot of times, because they were only there for a couple days, you had a couple hours to dress, rehearsal it, and then put it on stage.
Wow.
So crazy.
So it was different every single time.
It was different every time, no matter what.
Wow.
Many of the people in attendance came for free. The cast obviously walked away with a wealth of experiences, and the whole endeavor to me is just a really fantastic example of the potential that theater has to be shared globally. One thing that I love about this book is that Dromgoole is able to capture his excitement really well in this written text, which, because his main thing is a director, not an author, I was a little bit wary of, but you really see his passion and excitement throughout, which is super cool.
And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how you have to fling a little bit of your nonsense or just your emotional anecdotes in there to make sure that people understand, like, this is important to you.
And that's exactly what I was like in my script. That's the next thing I was going to say. Like, I chose this as my first bit of scholarship because it's not that scholarly.
I love that. Yeah.
At least not in like that expected stuck up highbrow sort of way.
Yeah.
It's not dense. It's a really easy read if you want to read it. And yet our author still injects like a lot of analysis into the book. That you would usually expect in, say, an article on Hamlet. Mm-hmm. And because he intermingles this analysis with entertaining stories, you never get that feeling that you're reading something academic.
I like that.
And it's really fun. Now, that being said, this book, like any other book, it's not perfect. Mm-hmm. Dominic Dromgoole is a white man who is aware that he's a white man. He says it a lot, like an awkward amount of times. And even though he like mentions it, he comes across as being really ignorant. Oh. So let me just give you an example. So when Dromgoole arrives with his cast in Djibouti, he is greeted by a British council member. Okay. And he writes of it, and he in his writing, he impersonates the person, and he says, "Hello, I am the British council." I feel bad even saying that, but that's how it's written out.
He does like dialect.
He writes it out phonetically.
Okay. And I hate that.
Yeah. And then this is the continuation of the quote. He says, "My startled reaction revealed my prejudice. I didn't cover it well. You can't be. You're French." And then he just reverts back to the dialect, like writing, "It is a long story." So I'm not sure what Dromgoole is trying to do by admitting his ignorance so publicly.
Does it seem like it's coming off in like an intentionally like making fun of himself way?
I think that's what he was trying to do.
But then why still write with I dialect? I keep using this word. I dialect is like when you write out like the phonetic or the pronunciation of things to capture the dialect.
That's why I was like, that's why it's not making sense to me. Like, why would you do that then?
That is weird.
And like, you could have just said he had a French accent.
Yeah.
You could have just said that.
And then let that
and that would have been that. And then he does it again. Like he explains later in the book when he had a radio spot that failed. And he says, "I was being boxed into the corner as the wicked white man." Oh. Awkwardly for everyone, I was doing most of the boxing myself, but I was a dead man as I entered. And I was like, okay, so you admitted that you were like being ignorant. But like for why? Like, and if there's no lesson, like you don't have any
here's my question. Does it seem like he's like past me was an idiot, or is it still like he's casting himself as the same person?
So here's the thing. If you admit your ignorance, great. Mm-hmm. But you should admit it because you're going to like change it.
Yeah.
Right?
Or at least provide something so that like your audience is aware of the fact that you no longer still stand there.
And so the only thing that was giving me pause was because he would like admit his ignorance in these anecdotes, but then in his writing, he would still exoticize the countries that he went to.
I despise that.
Yeah. So just if you read this book, be aware of that.
Okay.
Like the way he describes tuk-tuks is like really bad. And
but you would think though that like the experience of meeting all of these different people and interacting with them and getting to know them,
you would think.
But does he like make it clear what his mindset was in the time when he was doing this? Like, ooh, I'm bringing Shakespeare to all of these.
He does say later, he says like, we just had like a dream to bring Shakespeare to every country. Like we just thought it would be cool. Basically what happened is they had just finished like a season or something like that. And they were all at a bar celebrating, and he was like a little bit tipsy and said, "What if we brought Hamlet to every country in the world?" And people were like, "Yeah, we should do that." And then all of a sudden it became like a real thing that they were doing.
Okay. When the plans finally make it out of the group chat, I guess.
No, exactly. And that's basically how this happened. Mm-hmm. And so he had no, like, he wasn't like ill-intentioned.
Yeah. It was just like a thought.
But yeah, the way he describes countries, especially the ones that aren't Western, is a little, he also has beef with the French. But
well, he's British, isn't he? Yeah.
So there you go.
There we go.
But yeah, it is very I don't know. It's very strange. Mm-hmm. So just be aware of that. But his book does have a lot of really thought-provoking stuff, and we don't have 12 hours, unfortunately. So instead, I picked a couple of topics for us to touch on and have a conversation about. And I've also curated a list of unhinged, potentially problematic, powerful, and sometimes comedic quotes to end the episode with.
Okay.
But the main topics for today are Shakespeare and colonialism, the choice to die and the choice to kill, interrupting the flow, and academia versus the theater. So these topics can go out of order, and we will not hit everyone. We are at 55 minutes already.
And that's
recording.
okay.
There's no way. But I think we could at least do 2.
Mm-hmm.
So Haley, you get to pick which 2 you want to talk about.
I am curious about interrupting the flow right off the bat.
All right, let's start with that one. So actually, don't look at my notes.
Oh.
Because I want to start with a question for you.
Oh, no. I did not study.
So to you, no, it's a pretty easy question, I think.
Okay. We're going to expose me.
Why does the middle of a play matter to you? Like if you're reading a play, why does the middle of the play matter? Or finding out what the middle is?
I feel like that's always just where, if not the most intense, then the most interesting and dynamic action tends to happen.
Right.
In my brain, the third act is usually where we have a lot of like scene changes that are like random or short, and you're getting a bunch of like crumbs of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then like act 4 is usually where you see how everything plays out.
Yeah. So if you were writing like an essay on Hamlet, like why would you care about like the middle? How would that play for you?
Well, I would have to.
For why? To mention it in your essay, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an easy question.
Okay.
It's not supposed to be hard.
That felt like a trick question. I got scared.
No, because why do theater practitioners care about the middle? Because of intermission.
Oh my God. Okay.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about, I know, this is why I was like, don't look at my notes, because you're going to be so confused, and then I'm going to say something really obvious.
Okay. I went way too deep with my thoughts. I was like, because what happens in Act 3 of Hamlet?
Well, let's talk about it. So how Dromgoole talks about the middle of Hamlet, which actually finding out like the middle, finding the climax of Hamlet is really hard, because you could say that it happens when he says, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth, which is like the end of like this is like Act 4 when that happens.
Yeah.
Which by that point it's like, okay, but usually it's like this. You don't want like that doesn't make our pyramid even. Like that feels wrong.
Yeah.
So what Dromgoole says is that what happens is it's when the characters meet each other, when Claudius and Hamlet meet. What he means by that is he says on 155, one character, Hamlet, is spooled inexorably towards an act of murder, a threat reeled ineluctably towards the strike of the act. Another character, Claudius, we watch unspooling away from his crime.
Ooh.
And there's a point at which they meet in the middle, and Dromgoole says that that's the point where Hamlet pauses before deciding not to kill Claudius, and when Claudius realizes that he actually can't beg for forgiveness because his thoughts aren't going up to heaven.
Interesting.
And so he says that's the middle, because that's where the characters intersect.
It's the intersection. And
yeah,
I'm imagining the intersection, depending on the play, could be uneven.
Yes.
But it's like about the character progression.
Right.
And their like personal arcs.
Right.
Interesting.
So the reason that this is interesting then is because there's the speech that Claudius gives in Act 3, Scene 1, when he says, and it's from page 155, "Oh, 'tis true, how smart a lash that speech doth give my conscience. The harlot's cheek, beautied with plastering art, is not more ugly to the thing that helps it than is my deed to my most painted word, O heavy burden." This is before the play. So this is the first time Claudius acknowledges that he's guilty. And then right after that is Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. And the Globe actually cut the speech here. And so they illustrated these two moments. There's the part where Hamlet and Claudius cross, which is when Claudius is begging for forgiveness and Hamlet decides not to kill him. Mm-hmm. And then there's this point where it crosses. And then the question is, well, where do you put the intermission? Because we have like these two crossing points.
Yeah.
Now, when you're writing a paper about Hamlet, You don't have to care about the intermission. The intermission doesn't matter. But when you're watching Hamlet and it's a theater production, the intermission fundamentally changes how people watch the play.
Yeah.
Because the intermission is the moment in which you turn to the person sitting next to you and talk about what has just happened.
Oh, yeah.
And so
it's also when you get up to go to the bathroom.
It's also when you get up to go to the bathroom and get a snack and whatever. So there's two things, but actually that's an important point that you bring up.
Really?
Yes, because by getting up, going to the bathroom, getting a snack, whatever, you're throwing
ruminating
yourself back into reality. So what you want to do is every time you put an intermission somewhere, you have to recognize you're disrupting the flow of the play, and the only way to get people back into the reality of the play is to have something exciting directly after the intermission.
Yeah.
And so for musicals, it's a lot of times like written out for you. In Shakespeare, it's not written out for you because that's not how Shakespeare wrote it. He didn't write it with an intermission in mind. And so with Hamlet, it's like this intermission spot clearly needs to be between these two crossing moments. So that way you have a crossing moment right before intermission, a crossing moment right after intermission.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think about too is, and this is why I guess performance studies is kind of interesting to me, because now I'm starting to think about how does that interaction between two people talking about what has just happened in the play, how does that change the play itself? Because when you're watching the play and you can't interact with anyone else, all you have is your own thoughts. The moment the intermission hits and you have thoughts with someone else, you as the audience member start analyzing the play. So you now have adopted two roles, audience member and analyzer.
Interesting. No, I like that a lot.
And so for the rest of the play, you're going to be both analyzing it and being that audience member, and you have your partners, whoever you were talking to, their thoughts in mind. So now this dynamic of the play opens up to be before in the first act or the first half, if you're talking about Shakespeare, it's a personal experience between you and the actors. And then after the intermission, it's no longer a personal experience. It's a group experience between you and whoever you talk to and the actors.
Interesting. Okay, this is reminding me of something that I read for my reception and performance studies paper for my fan fiction essay that I wrote. Yes,
I
did
love
write
this.
That. I cannot remember exactly what the phrasing was, but this book was talking about how British women were receiving American Hollywood movies during the war.
Right.
And how the inner theater experience, the affect is different because it's like an interaction between you and the person on the screen. When you leave the theater, it is now extra theatrical. It's you are leaving with it, and you are also interacting with people as you're throwing away your popcorn buckets and all of these things. Movies don't have intermissions.
No.
So there's also, you're more critical of the second act of the play than you can be about an entire movie, unless you've rewatched the movie now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm literally thinking about when we went to see...
Poor Things?
No. Oh, yes, Poor Things. What did we see before that? When we went to Stanton for... Which Shakespeare play did we see?
Much Ado About Nothing.
Much Ado About Nothing, yes. At the intermission, I was not as critical as you were because you were looking from a theater aspect. Yeah. I was looking from an entertainment aspect because I cannot watch Shakespeare and think critically. I have to read Shakespeare and think critically.
Yeah.
You watch Shakespeare and think critically. So I was more critical and paying more attention to the way that they would change words or rhythm for the second half, because now it was both, you were the analyst in my head while I was being the watcher.
That's what I'm saying, because when you turn to someone, all of a sudden your opinion changes, because you can be enjoying the show and think it's 5 out of 5 stars. You turn to your partner's like, I don't like this. And suddenly you're now watching it, trying to critique what could they not be liking.
Yeah.
You can't help but have it be in your head. It fundamentally changes the way in which you interact with theater.
That is, because I'm also whoa. No, making more connections.
I'm sorry, I need to write an article on this.
No, because you do. Because it's also reminding me of do you ever read a book and you go on Goodreads and you're about to give that thing 5 stars?
Yes.
You're about to give that thing 5 stars and you see that has an average of 2.5 and you're like, what did I miss? And then it's also, there's a difference between talking about it with someone and then reviewing it on a platform, because it might also be just like an environmental thing, but like I would never be afraid of like being stupid with you. Like me being like, I really like that movie, and then like you have a list of like things that you hate about it, like that's fine.
Right.
But like online, you want to seem, everybody wants to seem like a critic, even if you're not reading like a critic.
Yep.
And like I'm thinking the first act of the play, I'm not watching like a critic. The second half, after I've discussed it, I'm watching as a critic.
Yeah. So you can turn to your partner and have something else to say.
Oh my gosh.
It like becomes about you and your experience, and you're aware that you're experiencing it, and you want to be able to walk away with something from that experience.
And also just the act of walking back into the theater, you have to physically put yourself back into the world.
Yeah.
You have to re-engage, and
live theater is so cool, guys.
Oh my God. No, because these are things that and again, you have to go to topic number 2, academia versus theater.
Okay.
Because this is literally like, I feel like this is why we have such engaging conversations about these things, because I see myself as like an academic. I am the English person. You're the theater person.
Yeah.
And you are critical of so many different things that I would have never thought to even glance at before.
Yeah.
And then like my whole thing is like drawing the connections. And so by the end of every movie or book that we consume, we both have like different red string theories going on the wall. And it is so funny comparing them.
It's so cool.
Because there's also rarely overlap until we both start talking.
Right.
And it is so funny.
But what I love, that's why I was like, don't look at my notes, because I was like, I'm going to tell you something like so obvious that every play has an intermission. And then it's like, but we don't think about it.
I would have never considered that. Like...
Isn't that crazy?
I hate that, but I love that.
No, but I think like, is that not like your fan fiction paper? You're like, everyone's overlooking fan fiction. Turns out there's a lot here.
There's a lot here. Also, every critic is writing fan fiction. Like, what do you mean you are going to put together 20 pages talking about this book?
Yeah. Anyway, that's like, that is my favorite thing in the world, when I have a thought and I'm like, this is so obvious. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, but no one's talked about it.
And then you whisper it to me and I act like you just showed me how the moon turns on. Like, it's crazy.
Like, this is why I'm so excited about this podcast.
No, me too. Like we just need to make an actual like red string board.
It would be
by the end of this.
It
would be horrendous.
Horrifying.
We're going to need so many spools of yarn.
So many. Let's get on to the second topic before we end.
I'm so excited.
So academia versus theater. So one of the reasons why I want a PhD in English is because I come from a theater background, and I really want to look at how theater practitioners are looking at Shakespeare versus how literary critics are looking at Shakespeare, because they look at it differently and they also roast each other bad.
They fight.
And the reason that I started being interested in this was at my very first symposium. There was a woman who is a fantastic critic, whatever, and she had mentioned that her friend was Tina Packer. And Tina Packer is the head of Shakespeare and Company. And my friend had recently trained there because she's an actor. And so I walked up to this academic and I was like, wow, like, it's so cool that you're friends with Tina Packer, because my friend was just studying at Shakespeare and Company, and I read Tina Packer's book, Women of Will, which maybe I'll have to bring that to the podcast at some point.
That would be fun.
I was like, yeah. And the academic looked at me and she was like, oh yeah, you know, that's actually what inspired me to write my book. And I'm thinking she's about to say something so sweet. And instead what she says is, because if someone like Tina Packer thinks she can write a book, then I certainly can. And I was like, you guys are friends? Are you sure?
Are you friends, or do you guys just like know each other? Because that's also different. But also academics are crazy.
No, but like she had sent Tina like her book draft, and Tina said, I can't understand this.
That's going to be us one day. You're going to get a manuscript and be like, what are you talking about?
Anyway, back to academia versus theater. Dromgoole actually attacks academics.
Period.
So he says, I'm just going to read 2 quotes here. On 189, he says, they were also all clearly from the tribe of Academy. I don't know what word this is in British English. I'm just going to say they were all also clearly from the tribe of Academia, a tribe with whom I had a patchy record.
A patchy record is crazy.
So then a couple pages later, he explains it. He says on 193, producing Shakespeare has always relied more than anything on joy, on innocence, and on enthusiasm. But try arguing for those 3 at a Congress of Shakespeare scholars without looking like a blithering Pollyanna. For many of the academic community, these beautiful words let flimsily on paper cannot just be that. beautiful words on flimsy paper. They have got to be about territorialism and control and ownership, fundamentally because those arguing the case want more than anything else to be the owners. Oh, they want to be the hierarchically ordained priest caste who can tell others how to enjoy them. The circumstances of the play's productions have to be about power and influence and negotiation so they can be the arbiters of how such transactions take place. I've never heard a more thorough roasting of Shakespeare scholars.
No, but that's also so real.
Right. Admittedly, he says many of the scholars, the academic community, but not all. But I'm like, babe, you then proceeded to like just absolutely obliterate them.
Can I ask, perhaps, let me problematize that real quick.
Yeah.
What is the impact of a white man saying this?
Yeah.
Because, like, it sounds like he's trying to do that whole, like, the Shakespeare scholars are colonizing Shakespeare.
Well, this is what I think is interesting, is that, and you bring up a really great point here, which is that I think he's doing this pitting against of literary critics versus himself as a theater practitioner in order to distract from the fact that both have contributed to a legacy of like Shakespeare that's been harmful in many ways. And so, because the way that you try to separate yourself as the good is by finding a them. And so he uses literary critics as his them.
Which is interesting because it is that whole, and I would somewhat sympathize in that regard with the whole, like, they are trying to like find and inject all of this meaning where it doesn't need to be. And I do have like a lot of issues with that, with like everything being like politicized. To be fair, Shakespeare is very cagey about all of his politics and you don't really know what's going on. And it's also like the queen is paying for him to continue making stuff. So it's like, there's only so much that we can read into with him dead. We can't like go and interview him. So you just kind of have to make stuff up as you go. And like, there is a high degree of elitism from a lot of like early modernists.
Yes.
Because it's this whole like it's super highbrow and it's like it's really not.
And I don't think he's wrong either that like I don't think he says producing Shakespeare has relied more than anything on joy, on innocence and enthusiasm. I think that's what theater has relied on.
That's what I was going to say, because I don't think that's exclusive to Shakespeare at all.
That's what theater is about. Is joy and enthusiasm and bringing entertainment to people. But that doesn't mean that it has been really exclusive about who can have that joy and who can have that enthusiasm. And if you don't like acknowledge that, then you can't understand like the role that Shakespeare plays, and it's good and bad.
Yeah, because I'm also thinking about the Globe when I went to see, what did we see? We saw Comedy of Errors and Midsummer Night's Dream and maybe one more. It might have been Measure for Measure. I don't remember. I think that one was RSC, not the Globe. But at the Globe, it's just, theater is so like welcoming to queer and people of color and women, and just like seeing the amount of diversity on the stage is like, it's so comforting for me to like, this goes into my whole like unimagined reader thing. Yeah. There is an unimagined reader of Shakespeare, but there is also an unimagined groundling at every Shakespeare performance. But like seeing like a Black, like gender non-conforming person be Othello. Yeah. Or like, it's just,
or be Helena.
Be Helena,
Hermia.
yeah.
Like that was my experience at Utah Shakespeare Festival. And it was like that. Yeah, it's refreshing.
It's refreshing, and it makes you. That is what did he call it? Joy and innocence and enthusiasm. Yeah. That is there, but that is also full circle. That is also on stage with Hamilton. That is also on stage with Heathers. Like that is with theater and acting, and honestly, creating with other people. Any collaborative creation tends to have a lot of that, especially if it's not a particularly lucrative type of creation. And it's not exclusive to Shakespeare, because respectfully, Shakespeare will always be lucrative.
Right.
Because we can't not be, it's hard to avoid him. So it's like that will always be lucrative. So I don't think that it is solely that. And that's also doing this kind of like subversive elitism thing where he's like, well, we're better than them because we're doing it out of love.
Well, that's the thing. He was basically like, we're better than them because we're less academic, which is like, is reverse elitism a thing? I was like, why is he trying to make his argument like we're not elitist and therefore we're elite?
But that's also going into him, like he boxed himself into being the wicked white man.
Right.
He boxed himself into being the elite wicked white man in a really weird way where he could have made like a very strong point.
Yeah.
Because I think that this is like your entire thing with your research, but like this whole us versus them thing completely cancels out the necessity of like reaching across the aisle. And instead of inviting the academics to have a conversation that is lower brow, I guess if he's considering them so highbrow, that is like meeting at some kind of middle point, he's being like, well, we're never going to see eye to eye. Therefore.
Yeah. And I think ultimately that's why I am so interested in like making my research life's work these intersections, because look at like all of that stuff, all that analysis, all of these things that we're missing because of this divide.
Yeah.
Which ultimately is such a stupid like divide. Who cares?
This is also just a problem with a lot of academia in general.
Oh, 100%.
Because you have to have a discipline.
And your discipline has to be the best one.
And it has to be completely distinct from the people who are doing the exact same thing just 5 years earlier than you.
Right.
And this one doesn't count for this, and this one, and also you're not allowed to have more than one discipline interest.
It's insane.
It's like, I feel like we need more. There's like this thing where everybody is a specialist, so no one is a generalist. And when you're a generalist, you can see a lot more of the connections and find a lot more of those intersections. And also, your red string diagram on the wall is going to be way bigger.
And also, I'm sorry, for something like Shakespeare, you're not going to really like, I'm saying this and it's not like completely true, but for the most part, you're not going to find anything new historically about Shakespeare or his plays. The only new shit that you can find are new connections.
Yeah.
You cannot make those connections if you're not willing to be interdisciplinary.
I would say drop the mic, but they're on the table.
They're on a stand.
But no, that is
And that doesn't just apply for Shakespeare. That applies to a lot of shit.
It applies to basically, I want to say almost everything, but I would say everything that we consider canon or classic. You're not going to find that much new stuff about it.
No.
Unless we unearth his diary from when he was 12 years old before his mom died. Like, we're not finding any new information.
No.
We are just finding new ways to think about it. And also finding new ways to interpret it as we become more sensitive to different things and start to care about different things and look at them in a more like interrogative manner, where it's like, now I need to ask Othello what this means in the age of this. Now I need to figure out what like Hermia means now versus then. So it's like the time and the new connections that are being made are what is new.
Yes.
And also, say what you're going to say. Shakespeare himself wasn't really doing anything.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't. And that's okay, because we have solidified him into a canon where so many different people can think about him.
Exactly.
We have No Fear Shakespeare. We have Schmoop. We have like Romeo and Juliet. Like Shakespeare is so everywhere that it is impossible to not know anything about him. And even if you are not an academic or you are not like a theater professional, you know something about it. So everyone can think about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it good.
No matter how, like, and your perspective matters. You know, like, no matter where you're from, your perspective matters.
Even if I completely disagree with you and I think that you just said the most out-of-pocket thing in your life, I am now more solidified in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm also probably going to talk about you with my friends.
Right.
And then we'll have another opinion about
But that's where conversations and connections happen.
Exactly.
So to conclude this episode, this was so cool.
No, this was beautiful.
This was awesome.
I'm really happy.
This is better than I could have expected, and I'm not gonna lie, I expected it to be good.
I was kind of worried this morning because I was like, oh my God, I don't know what she's gonna say, and mine is just gonna be standalone. But that just our entire job was finding the connections, and that's what we do, and that's what we did.
Why did we ever doubt ourselves?
There's no such thing as an imposter when we're in the room. There's only a dilettante
and a scholar.
Oh my God.
So to end up, I'm going to give you some of the most unhinged quotes.
Can I rate them?
Yeah, you can rate them.
I'm going to give them out of 5 stars.
Okay. As is true everywhere, last year's terrorist is this year's president.
5. That's a 5. That's 5. What the hell? That's a 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
The French have an exquisite ability to assert, wherever they happen to be, a height of understanding and a depth of insight well above the mortal, all while keeping their trousers immaculately creased. He has like an obsession with hating, but like loving the French.
I'm going to give him a 2.5 because I can't tell what is going on in his head.
He needs an enemies to lovers arc with the
Because
French.
that's what I'm getting from it. Why are you looking at their trousers? Actually, rounding it up to 3.
Okay. Functioning as a pressure cooker meeting place for all the world's Poloniuses and wannabe Ciceros, the UN is not backwards in aggrandizing its own mystique. It was built to put all the world's problems into the enclosing fog of its own smoke and mirrors. The process of getting inside was a protracted one of consultation, begging, and form filming, and a lot of waiting, the ultimate tool of power.
I'm mad at the UN right now, so that's a 4. That's a solid 4.
And finally, sometimes you get the feeling you should adjourn a day halfway through.
Real. That is so real. That is a 10 out of 5.
10 out of 5.
I think it's time for us to adjourn.
I think it is time for us to adjourn. So
thanks for listening to this week's episode of
The Dilettante Scholars. If you enjoyed tuning in and want to support the work that goes into making these podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a like and subscribe on YouTube. You can also support us monetarily by becoming a patron of our Patreon. It's only the cost of a cup of coffee per month and will grant you access to more Dilettante Scholar content.
Links are in the description. Thanks again, and see you next time.